This week's 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Delos 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash. Schools of thought have changed around transmissions, namely automated versus manual, and it's affected transmission fluids and change intervals. Hey everybody, Merry Christmas and welcome to the 1044, a weekly webisode from the editors here at CCJ. I'm Jason Cannon and my co-host and Santa's little helper on the other side is Matt Cole. The evolution of the truck engine over the last decade has been pretty dramatic, but there may be no more dramatic shift than what we've been seeing happen into transmissions. It used to be that an automated transmission was a premium option on a new truck, but a pricing deduct when that same truck went to the used market. Now it's basically the industry standard with penetration rates over 90% at most OEMs and over 70% on the low side.
Changing attitudes towards transmission type influences maintenance decisions. For example, the lube change interval for Eaton's Endurant HD 12-speed is 750,000 miles. For a manual Fuller Advantage, it's about 500,000.
Of course, duty cycle and a number of other influences come into play here, and while transmission fluid itself can be kind of a set-it-and-forget-it kind of lube, Penny Doe, product technical specialist with Chevron Lubricants, says it's important to lean on OEM recommendations for regular wellness checks.
I would start with the OEM. The OEM they're evolving. They're recognizing the value of the set it and forget it. That's why you see a trending in those longer drain intervals. They want to really try to make it easier for the fleet owners to manage their equipment. Another thing to check would be the elemental analysis. Look at different things like the additives. Are they still there? Some of it is sacrificial, so you will see that is normal. But then you also have your wear metals that can give indication, but should be looked at with some discretion because some of those transmissions could have magnetic drain plugs, and that could hold some of the metal fines, and that could then skew your result.
Just about every fleet is familiar with the benefits of engine oil sampling and even coolant sampling. They can give you insights into what's going on in your engine before it leads to emergency downtime. That same is true for sampling transmission fluid.
So another consideration that you can make would be oil monitoring, and you do want to defer to your OEM manual to see if this is a necessary preventative maintenance practice. And then with that, the manual itself will typically include very specifically on how to get a good sample. You want to take a sample that could then lead you down the wrong path. So that's why the sample quality is of importance as well. If you do submit for testing, some of the things that you could be reviewing in the report could be the viscosity. The viscosity could potentially shear out of grade and maybe be too thin to provide that lubricant film for the components, such as the gears and bearings, or it could overly thicken. As oil oxidizes, it polymerizes and becomes thicker and sludgier and will be harder to move in the transmission and could potentially cause overheating and not be at the right viscosity for certain components to work, such as the hydraulics.
Elemental analysis is an important test to run where you're looking for wear metals. The curveball here being that some drain plugs are magnetic and designed to capture fine metals, which could give you a lower number in the analysis than what is the reality. Other tests look for contamination and particle count, which Penny says is basically a filter check.
If you're topping off and the wrong fluid was put in there, that could be another thing to watch out for in these reports. Particle count, that's something that could be reviewed to ensure that the oil filter is working as it should, that there's a relatively clean oil in there, because those small particles could get into those small clearances and eventually do some damage to those gears and moving parts. And then acid number. Acid number also occurs when the oil has been oxidized. As the oil oxides, it creates these acidic species which live in the oil and then could be corrosive to those metal parts as well.
Just like engine oil, there are preferred transmission fluid types, and getting this wrong is bad news. But before Penny tells us the repercussions, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor, Chevron Lubricants.
Protecting your diesel engine and its aftertreatment system has traditionally been a double-edged sword. The same engine oil that is so essential to protecting your engine's internal parts is also responsible for 90% of the ash that is clogging up your DPF and upping your fuel and maintenance costs. Outdated industry thinking still sees a trade-off between engine and emission system protection, and Chevron was tired of it, so they spent a decade of R&D developing a no-compromise formulation. Chevron Lubricants developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by a whopping 60%, which reduces the rate of DPF clogging and extends DPF service life by 2.5 times. And just think what you can do with all the MPGs you're going to add from cutting your number of regens. But Delo 600 ADF isn't just about aftertreatment. It provides complete protection, extending drain intervals by preventing oil breakdown. Before, you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system, and now you don't. 600 ADF from Delo with OmniMax technology, it's time to kick some ash.
Manual transmissions have a lot more fluids available to them because they're mostly gears. And so there's like a wider array of fluids that could work with manual transmissions without issue. So more interchange with axle oils and even amongst the manual transmissions themselves. But as modern transmissions are evolving, they're becoming amazingly complex and specialized. They have different materials, and so often they're co-designed with the fluid in mind. So it's just really specialized and specific. The friction properties, the friction material, the hydraulic systems, the way that the clutches are actuated, the hardware designs, it could be really sensitive. And so even like a slight viscosity difference could make the transmission sluggish or just not work the way it was designed and intended to work.
Using the wrong fluid can lead to catastrophic failure of the transmission, but some of the more important factors that go into fluid selections is material and compatibility.
So if something has a friction material, but the fluid, it doesn't have the friction modifiers to get that to work properly, then you're definitely going to get some rough shifting or things just not shifting right, and clutch issues as well. So that is why the lubricants are designed the way they are, to accommodate a lot of times the friction materials. And then also the hydraulics and as I mentioned, the ways that the clutch is actuated, that's specific OEM to OEM, and that could be impacted as well. So the shiftability, I guess I should say, could be impacted. And then obviously if that's prolonged, that can cause gear wear and ultimate failures. I've seen more differences with maybe the EP requirements, so the extreme pressure additive requirements for the different transmissions, and as well as maybe the friction modifiers, whether they want them or not, and because of the different friction materials that could go into the transmissions.
In many cases, a fleet operator won't have to do much with the transmission fluid, assuming you're the first owner and maybe the second. Like I mentioned earlier, change intervals for AMT can run around 750,000 miles, depending on duty cycle, which is about a 50% bump from a comparable manual. The bump in mileage, Penny says, is due largely to removing the variability in how and when a driver shifts gears manually, since the ECM only shifts when it feels like it's necessary.
I think the transmission manufacturers are definitely trying to make things as automated as possible and to take that guesswork out of the operators and the fleet managers. So you could see those increased drain intervals because the transmissions are just designed to run optimally. And so it's that's how you're getting that fuel economy. Automatic manual transmissions, you're taking the guesswork out of the shifting. Therefore, you could be seeing an increase in drain intervals.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com, and as always, you can find the 1044 each week on CCJ's YouTube channel. And if you've got questions, comments, criticisms, or feedback, please hit us up at 1044trucking@gmail.com or give us a call, 404-491-1380. And until next week, everybody have a Merry Christmas.